In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on February 25th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Louisiana State versus Mississippi. LSU heads into Oxford on a weeknight in the Southeastern Conference, and the whole matchup has that slightly chaotic big conference energy that bettors love. The records paint one picture at first glance, LSU sitting at 14-13 overall with a 4-7 mark away from home, while Ole Miss is stuck at 11-16 with a 9-8 home record. It is easy to look at that and think one team is clearly trending up and the other is just trying not to trip over itself. Then you zoom out a bit, and the story starts to twist. LSU has been kind to anyone backing them against the number, cashing far more often than not, while Ole Miss has burned plenty of tickets this season. That split alone makes the roadside feel attractive, almost like the book is handing out a small gift. Yet the matchup itself nudges things the other way. Ole Miss has quietly controlled this series in their own building for years, stacking up wins at home even in seasons where the roster did not exactly scream powerhouse. That kind of history does not guarantee anything, but it does show that the environment in Oxford has not been very welcoming for visitors in these meetings. On the floor, the contrast in styles is what really pulls your eye. LSU leans into a more explosive identity, built around a high-scoring attack that likes to play with tempo, pressure the rim, and live at the foul line when defenses start reaching. They shoot it efficiently, they get to their spots, and when they are rolling it feels like every possession ends with either a layup or free throws. For a lot of teams in this league, that combination is a nightmare. Ole Miss counters in a quieter way, but not a softer one. They treat the ball like it belongs in a museum, rarely throwing it away. And that low turnover style keeps opponents from getting easy transition chances. They lean on a deep bench that chips in heavy scoring, which means there is always another fresh body coming in, another defender with live legs, another role player who can give 6 hard fouls or knock down a timely jumper. Over 40 minutes, that steady rotation starts to matter, especially when the other side relies more heavily on a smaller core of creators. Defensively, the Rebels bring enough rim protection to change how teams attack them. They challenge shots inside, they block a healthy number of attempts, and they make drivers think twice before barreling straight to the cup. That becomes especially important against an LSU group that wants to live in the paint and force officials to make decisions. If those drives turn into contested floaters instead of clear fouls, the math tilts away from the visiting offense in a hurry. There is also the not-so-small issue of LSU's own defense, which has not always backed up the sparkle of their scoring numbers. They surrender plenty of points, give up efficient shooting nights, and allow opponents to find rhythm both inside and beyond the arc. In a tight conference game on the road, when every empty trip feels heavier, that kind of leakiness can be the difference between stealing one late and watching the home crowd go nuts while the clock runs out. So while the resumes and recent spread results make LSU look like the safer ticket, the mix of home court comfort, ball security, depth, and more reliable rim protection nudges the matchup slightly toward the Rebels when you think about who is more likely to finish inside the number at home. As our first pick for this matchup, the Ole Miss Rebels to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Scoring-wise, the expectation from oddsmakers is clearly that this turns into more of a track meet than a rock fight. You have one team that plays with offensive flair and another that quietly allows a fair amount of points, so on paper it is easy to imagine a game where the scoreboard operator gets a workout. If you add up season scoring and points allowed for both, the combined totals land in that high range that casual fans love because it feels like there will be action on almost every trip down the floor. It sounds simple, maybe even obvious. The way the points arrive, though, is not quite that simple. LSU's offense leans heavily on attacking the basket and earning free throws, so a big chunk of their production depends on whistles. They are good at drawing contact, and they cash in when they get to the line, which can puff up totals when games turn choppy. Ole Miss, on the other hand, has more of a committee feel. They score enough, but their approach is steadier, less explosive, and not built on one nuclear option catching fire from 30 feet. Another key detail is how Ole Miss starts games. They have a habit of easing into things, with first halves that are more methodical than chaotic. That type of slow simmer keeps early scoring under control, even in matchups that eventually wake up late. When the home side is not racing up the floor, the visiting team often gets dragged into that rhythm whether they like it or not. Both squads also favor shot profiles that lean toward twos and free throws rather than endless three-point barrages. They take their share of threes, sure, but neither lives and dies by high-volume bombing from deep. That matters because heavy three-point games can break totals wide open, especially when both sides catch a rhythm. Here, you are more likely to see possessions where teams probe, run half-court sets, and work through multiple actions before they finally get a look they can live with. Officiating tone adds another layer. If the crew blows everything tight and turns it into a free throw parade, long stretches of clock stoppage can inflate the final number. If they swallow the whistle a bit and let physical defense stand, then those same drives that usually earn trips to the line become contested twos and missed opportunities. With two teams that both rely on the stripe in different ways, that balance between contact and calls becomes a big swing factor for how high the score climbs. There is also the history between these programs, which has leaned toward higher scoring in recent meetings. That past, though, was shaped by different versions of these rosters and by totals that were often lower than what is being suggested for this particular matchup. This iteration of Ole Miss does not project as some wide-open, high-octane offense. It leans more on depth, ball security, and grinding through possessions, even if it still gives up its fair share of points. LSU's defense does its part to keep things interesting, since it allows enough scoring to make overs tempting in nearly every matchup. That said, when you combine a slower starting home side, two offenses that are not obsessed with bombing from deep, and a likely tug of war around the free throw line, the script starts to look less like a clear shootout and more like a game that flirts with a big total without always smashing straight through it. The number being discussed asks these teams to sustain scoring for both halves, not just in a late burst, and that is a taller task when the tempo leans half-court and possessions tend to stretch. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. UNLV versus Grand Canyon. UNLV walks into Phoenix staring at a tough road test against Grand Canyon, and it feels bigger than just another late February box score. Global Credit Union Arena is not a quiet place to figure things out. It is a 7,000-seat echo chamber where the Havocs treat every possession like a festival. And that kind of environment usually tells you who is sturdy and who is just streaky. Grand Canyon has settled into its new Mountain West home with a real sense of belonging, sitting at roughly 17-10 overall and 10-6 in league play, which paints them as a solid top-tier contender instead of a guest from the old Western Athletic Conference dropping by for nostalgia. UNLV, hanging around 14-13 and 9-7 in conference, feels more like the talented wild card, dangerous in stretches, but a little too willing to live with whatever the basketball gods roll on a given night. The first meeting between these two in early February in Las Vegas finished with UNLV sneaking out an 80-78 win, and that kind of razor-thin margin left Grand Canyon with a very clear picture of how close they were. Since that game, UNLV has leaned even harder into chaos, stringing together games where the score climbs fast, but the outcomes have been a mixed bag, right around 5-5 straight up in their last 10 and 4-6 against the spread, which says a lot about how their style leaves the back door open. They lean on streaks of shot-making and rhythm rather than on structure, fun to watch, but tricky to trust when you need a margin instead of just a win. Grand Canyon has been steadier, about 6-4 in their last 10 and an even 5-5 against the number, which sounds average on paper, yet the way they get there matters. They play with more balance, fewer emotional swings, and fewer possessions where you are asking, what exactly was that? Preseason analytics sites like KenPom had Grand Canyon slotted around the top 80 nationally with a profile built on both ends of the floor, the kind of team that prefers to grind you slowly over 40 minutes instead of flipping coins in late-game shootouts, and that type of identity tends to age well as the season wears on. Now fold in the revenge factor from that 2-point loss in Vegas, a fan base that proudly sells itself as one of the wildest student sections in college hoops, and a UNLV team that has been living in tight, high-variance finishes, and you get a setup where the more stable group with the stronger home floor is more likely to create real separation instead of another last shot scenario. As our first pick for this matchup, the Grand Canyon Lopes to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. That earlier 80-78 meeting did more than just tilt the season series. It showed how fast this matchup can catch fire when both teams get comfortable trading buckets. UNLV has treated recent games like pickup runs that accidentally got televised, piling up outings where they push into the 80s or better, and that free-flowing approach has produced a heavy lean toward higher scoring results, with something like 17-9 against the total on the season and a wild 9-1 trend in their last 10. The ball moves quickly, the shots go up early in the clock, and you can almost feel both teams getting dragged into a pace that favors rhythm jumpers and quick decisions rather than long, careful possessions. Honestly, for people who enjoy live betting or tracking games on apps like FanDuel or DraftKings, this kind of profile is a dream. You blink and the score has jumped again. Grand Canyon tells a different story when you zoom out. Their season mark against the total sits closer to 12-15, and that tilt hints at something less noisy, a group that might score enough but often controls games just enough defensively to keep things from becoming full track meets. Last season they averaged in the high 70s on offense and allowed somewhere in the high 60s, which matched the picture of a team that could score but still prided itself on getting stops, and that basic template has carried into this campaign. Recent outings this month include scores in the low 70s and mid 60s on both sides, the kind of results that often sneak under inflated expectations even when the opponent is capable. The Havoc's crowd adds energy, but it also makes running clean offense tough for visitors, especially when communication matters. And when both coaching staffs have fresh film from that first meeting, the natural adjustment is to shore up transition defense and take away the easiest early clock looks. Here is the thing, UNLV's recent fireworks have encouraged bookmakers to frame this as a fast, loose-scoring environment, but Grand Canyon's preferred script leans toward controlled stretches, more deliberate half-court possessions, and a ceiling that does not always match the public's memory of the last fun game they watched. So while the first clash between these two teased a repeat highlight show, the combination of defensive tweaks, Grand Canyon's steadier identity, and a slightly inflated scoring expectation makes a lower scoring outcome more appealing than just chasing that previous box score. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Utah State versus San Diego State. This matchup has that late February energy where everything feels a little bit bigger and a little bit louder than a normal game. Utah State comes in with the glossy resume, sitting around 23-4 overall and 13-3 in league play, the kind of record that looks great on a graphic. San Diego State trails just a step behind at roughly 18-8 and 12-4, which sounds less flashy but still keeps them right in the thick of the race. Odds makers are treating these two like they are basically equals on a neutral floor, but this one is not being played in a quiet gym with polite applause. It is at Viejas, and that matters. Utah State's style is easy to fall for. They move the ball, shoot with confidence, and hang numbers that pop off a box score, right around the mid-80s in points per game with efficient shooting over 50% from the field, which is no joke. It feels fun, almost free-flowing, and when that offense is humming, it can look like a video game where the sliders have been nudged just a bit in their favor. The problem, and there is a small one, shows up more once they leave home. That recent loss at Nevada, where they gave up a flurry of threes and got pushed around on the glass, is a good reminder that road games have a way of poking at any soft spots. In hostile buildings, legs get a little heavier, closeouts get a little slower, and the margin for error on every jumper shrinks. Drop that version of Utah State into a packed, noisy Viejas arena on a weeknight, and suddenly every rushed shot or lazy pass feels like an invitation for trouble. San Diego State lives in that chaos and actually seems to enjoy it. Their whole basketball identity leans on being long, physical, and annoying in the best possible way, the kind of defense that is not glamorous but definitely memorable. They score in the high 70s themselves but hold opponents right around the high 60s, and over their last stretch of games they have been even stingier, allowing roughly 67 points on under 46% shooting. That type of profile plays very well at home. The Aztecs rebound around the low 30s in boards per night, protect the rim with bigs who contest everything, and do not mind committing the kind of hard, smart fouls that make you think twice the next time you drive the lane. In their first meeting with Utah State, they still managed to drag the Aggies under their usual scoring average, even in Logan, where Utah State is most comfortable. Now they get the rematch in San Diego, with that earlier 71-66 loss tugging at them, which gives this game a bit of a revenge flavor rather than just another late season date on the schedule. With both teams coming in clean enough to throw their usual rotations on the floor, San Diego State has the bodies to keep applying pressure for a full 40 minutes, which usually tilts things toward the side that is dictating the physical tone. As our first pick for this matchup, the San Diego State Aztecs to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Scoring expectations here sit in an interesting place. On the surface, it is very easy to lean toward a high total because Utah State games have felt like track meets for long stretches of the season. Over their last 10, they have been pouring in around 82 points and giving up a little over 71, which puts their combined scores in the low 150s and makes points sound like the obvious script. If you only scroll through game logs or scroll through an app like ESPN or Flash Score, you see those numbers, shrug, and think, sure, this one probably flies. The story shifts once San Diego State's recent rhythm gets factored in. Across their last 10, the Aztecs are closer to the low 70s on offense and about 67 allowed, landing their average totals in the low 140s instead. That is a very different world, especially when you remember they are not shy about turning games into physical, half-court battles with lots of body contact and grinding possessions. The first time these two met this season, all that supposed offensive firepower still added up to only 71-66, which is a clear example of how quickly a game can slow down when San Diego State pulls everything into mud. Utah State is not suddenly going to walk the ball up and play in slow motion. That is not who they are, but being on the road against a defense like this and a crowd like this usually chips a few possessions off the top. Crowd noise messes with communication, the physicality wears on shooters, and you end up seeing more late clock situations, more fouls away from the rim, and more time spent just trying to find a clean look. With both benches deep enough to keep fresh defenders cycling in, fatigue can actually work against rhythm on the offensive side, because every time you think you have worn someone down, a new body checks in and leans on you again. When the general perception leans toward another up-and-down show, but the matchup screams slower, more deliberate, and a little more bruising, the scoring outlook quietly tilts in the opposite direction of the headline narrative. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Wisconsin versus Oregon. Wisconsin walks into this matchup with that familiar stubborn personality, the one that turns a basketball game into a long conversation about patience and discipline. Possession by possession, they slow the pace, force opponents to live in the half court, and squeeze value out of almost every trip. That kind of rhythm is frustrating for a team that wants to fly up and down and use length and athleticism to create chaos, which is exactly the sort of thing Oregon usually leans on at home. Instead of a track-style game, Wisconsin tends to turn it into a chessboard, and that shift matters a lot when you are thinking about who can actually cover a number over 40 minutes. The Badgers usually limit turnovers, protect the ball like it is a family heirloom, and make opponents defend for most of the shot clock. When your offense is that steady, you give away fewer freebies, and you force the other side to score in the half court again and again, which is harder than getting run-out layups. That style often exposes teams that rely more on streaks and momentum than on half-court execution. Here is the thing, it might not always look pretty, but ugly. Controlled basketball is often exactly what you want when your ticket depends on a favorite not letting things spin out of control late. Late in games, Wisconsin is usually comfortable operating with a small lead, taking the air out of the ball, and leaning on their structure. They grind clock, work for clean looks, and tend to live at the free throw line when defenses get desperate and start reaching. That is the kind of closing script that protects a margin instead of inviting a wild swing or a random backdoor cover that ruins the night. It sounds almost boring, but there is a quiet confidence that comes with a team that rarely beats itself and usually forces the opponent to make the last, hardest plays. Taken together, the methodical tempo, the ball security, the half-court comfort, and the ability to nurse a lead all point toward one side being better built to handle the pressure of carrying a spread. It is not about flash, it is about control, and control tends to cash more often than chaos in games like this. As our first pick for this matchup, the Wisconsin Badgers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Wisconsin's slow style hints at a grind, yet the other side of the coin is that Oregon at home almost always tries to crank things up, run off misses, and feed off the energy in the building. That push and pull between one team trying to walk the ball up and the other trying to race it up can actually create a surprisingly healthy number of possessions, especially once both teams settle in and adjust. Honestly, when one team insists on early offense and the other is content to be efficient rather than flashy, you can end up with more points than the stereotype suggests. Oregon's approach often involves gambling in the passing lanes, trapping in spots, and using length to bother ball handlers. Those risks sometimes pay off with easy points, but they also backfire with open looks when the offense stays calm and finds the open man. Every time a gamble misses, it can turn into a layup or a clean three, and that trading of punches tends to push scores upward. Even a slower team is happy to take free points if the door is left open. Then there is the late-game piece that quietly inflates totals in college hoops. If the score is tight, you get intentional fouls, free throws, timeouts, and drawn-up sets that are focused on getting quick, direct looks. The clock stops, players line up at the stripe, and those one-and-one or double bonus trips can add up fast. It might feel like the game is crawling, but the scoreboard keeps flickering. Modern spacing, more confidence in the three-point shot, and whistle-friendly drives to the rim all add extra scoring paths on both sides. Even in a game that never feels like a pure track meet, a mix of early offense from one team and efficient half-court answers from the other can steadily build a higher total than the tempo reputation alone would suggest. So while the pace might look controlled for stretches, the combination of transition chances, breakdowns from defensive gambles, and the almost inevitable parade of late free throws all lean in the same direction. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.